You're listening to Let's Get It On with Big John McCarthy and Sean Wheelock.
Big John McCarthy has witnessed the best that the UFC had to offer.
That is it! Game, set, match! We have a new champion!
Your backstage pass to the world of mixed martial arts and combat sports. Only on the Ignotainment Media Network.
Let's get it on!
Hey everyone, welcome to Let's Get It On with Big John McCarthy and me, Sean Wheelock. Every week on this podcast, John and I give you an inside look at MMA and combat sports, always separating fact from fiction. On this week's program, we'll discuss Ronda Rousey's dominant knockout win versus Bethe Correia in the main event at last Saturday's UFC 190 in Brazil, which John refereed. Big John and I will also examine the controversial main event from last Saturday's World Series of Fighting 22 in Las Vegas, Husamir Palhares versus Jake Shields, and we'll look back at the unfortunate occurrence in the Elizabeth Phillips versus Jessamyn Duke fight in UFC on Fox 16, in which Phillips briefly had her right breast exposed, and break down the responsibility of a referee in such situations. Plus, as we do on every episode of Let's Get It On, John will answer your questions. So ask away via email, info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. That's info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. Remember that you can download and subscribe to our podcast on the iTunes Store. For Android, download the Stitcher app and subscribe. And you can go straight to our website, letsgetitonpodcast.com. So, of course, all of you know that this past Saturday in Brazil, Ronda Rousey successfully defended her UFC women's bantamweight title as she defeated Bethe Correia by knockout in 34 seconds. John, you refereed the fight, and I think even above Correia, you had the best vantage point of Rousey's amazing skill set and tenacity, because Correia at one point wasn't seeing everything that was thrown her way, but you had the great view.
Yeah, well, I was definitely had the better placing because Ronda wasn't throwing punches in my direction, so I had the better aspect, I guess. But if you look at everything, I've said it before, with Ronda's fights and what I've been part of, in her fights is I give it to Bethe. Hey, Bethe came out and did her best. She came out after her, same as when Kat Zingano came out after her, or Liz Carmouche, or any of the ones that I've refereed with Ronda. These girls are coming out after Ronda. It's just that, right now she's in a position where she is a dominant athlete in that weight category, to the point of it's tough for girls to compete against her. And it's really, they don't understand, that they're looking at her and they're doing the same thing I would do. They're saying, hey, she's just another girl. If I was fighting a guy, hey, he's just another guy. He puts his pants on the same way as me. He can be hurt. She can be hurt. All of that stuff is the stuff that you're, telling yourself throughout training and everything. And you get to the fight and, obviously you're amped for the fight. But until you go in that cage with her and then end up just locking horns, throwing punches, and get hit by her or get grabbed by her, that's when the reality of the entire concept comes into full focus for you, because she is an animal that most of them are not prepared to deal with at this time.
John, I don't go to a lot of fight parties. I have a tendency to kind of like to watch it at home by myself, take it in. But my new grappling coach invited us to his house for a fight party. It was family friendly. I brought my girls. He has a young daughter. My wife, Kelly, was there. It was a mixed crowd. And what I noticed is that most people there weren't really interested in the other fights on the card. They had no idea who Bethe Correia was, to the point of they probably didn't even know going into the party who Ronda Rousey was fighting. The vast majority of people in that room were there to see Ronda Rousey. The closest thing that I've witnessed recently goes back to 2007 when I was a Major League Soccer commentator. People who knew nothing about soccer, who said soccer was boring, were turning out in droves to see David Beckham play for the LA Galaxy. It's where it transcends the sport. It just somehow seeps in popular culture. That's what we have with Ronda Rousey.
Oh, look at, anyone that wants to say anything about, oh, this is the most popular fighter, this is the most popular fighter, oh, this is the person that, got the most eyeballs on him. There is nobody ever in MMA. And you can look at a couple of people. Randy Couture has done a very good job of, he was very popular when he fought. He's done a very good job of maintaining that popularity now that he's out of actual fighting. He's transcended in going into different areas, using his popularity out of MMA to get him into aspects of, the film industry and things like that. you got Brock Lesnar and what he brought with his backing from the WWE and the people that came to watch him, and he transcended those two sports to a point. But there is no fighter that has ever transcended into the mainstream population the way that Ronda has. I mean, there are housewives talking about Ronda Rousey. There are, entertainers. We're talking, you got Demi Lovato tweeting out about she can't wait for Ronda Rousey's fight. You got Michael Irvin, playing for the Dallas Cowboys, one of, the playmaker playing on three Super Bowl teams. He travels to Brazil to watch Ronda Rousey fight. She has transcended the sport and brought other people in their eyes onto our sport in a way that no other athlete has ever been able to do.
It's truly amazing. And if you look at all of women's sports, who would be in this conversation? Serena Williams, Venus Williams, not so much. Mia Hamm from soccer, but maybe 10, 12 years ago. But even you think the U.S. just won the Women's World Cup this summer in Canada. None of the players from that Women's World Cup winning side from the United States have anywhere near the crossover appeal of Ronda Rousey. It really is simply amazing, to the point of being a phenomenon.
I mean, it's so amazing to watch. If you sit there, if you go to Brazil, Brazil is a very proud country as far as backing their athletes and the the respect that they have for their athletes. And when Bethe Correia came out for that walk from the backstage into that cage, that crowd went crazy. And they went crazy a little bit. There was a lot of applause for Ronda, and you can hear the people that were wanting Bethe and the things that they were saying, but incredibly loud. But when Ronda ends up winning that fight in the way she did so fast, and if you could have been there, the crowd was absolutely nuts for Ronda Rousey in Brazil against a Brazilian fighter. She beats a Brazilian there, and they absolutely were going nuts for her. And there's kids that are running up to her and stuff. The little girls that are around the world now wanting to be or wanting to emulate Ronda Rousey. That's part of what is this transcendence from just being MMA to her just walking into a mainstream of the world that no other fighter has reached that level that she has now attained. And it's just going to continue to grow because, I think Carl's Jr. just put out a thing because she's their new spokesperson. Because, and they've had,
that's right,
a couple of different, athletes there, and they've done, a couple of different ads, and they've had celebrities, now they've got Ronda Rousey, and you look and you go, man, this thing's just going to continue to explode with her. And you know what? She deserves it. I don't care what anyone says. You can sit there and, there's people that are going to like you. There's people that are going to hate you. She does everything right. She's smart. She trains incredibly hard. That's one of the things that I love about, when she goes in there, she may not be her best that night, but she's going to give you the best she has because she's prepared herself for it. And, a lot of times when you have as much success as she has had, you start to tail things off. You start to, put your priorities into other areas. You start to say, oh, you know what, this is enough, even though it's really not. And she has not done that. She has, basically, sectioned her life out into different, parts. She's, compartmentalized that to the point where she's got things going. She is absolutely, in tune with her fighting career, her acting career, the other things that come out, the philanthropic things that she does, giving the belt, that she did, to the judo school that she gave $30,000 to and everything, all of that stuff. You know what? She's doing things right. You got to respect someone that at her age, with what she has attained and the things that are coming her way, she's handling it incredibly well.
John, outside of MMA, if you look at the whole of combat sports, maybe the last time we've seen this sort of phenomenon is Mike Tyson. And think about this. Mike Tyson, before he was knocked out by Buster Douglas in Tokyo, February of 1990, it was to watch Mike Tyson fight. Pay your money for the pay-per-view to watch Mike Tyson fight. It didn't matter if he was fighting Larry Holmes or Carl the Truth Williams. it did not matter. People wanted to see Tyson. And to my point earlier, as I was talking about as we started our program, people in my fight party going in and even going out really didn't know who Bethe Correia was. I would have liked to have seen some exit polling. Everybody who watched that fight on pay-per-view afterwards, tell me who Ronda Rousey just beat. I think you would have had some blank looks. And that was Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson is the guy. I'm just here to watch Mike Tyson punch people in the head and body until they fall. It doesn't really matter who the opponent is.
I think, they match up incredibly well as far as a comparison. Mike Tyson was just this, animal that people looked at and said he's invincible and he destroys people. And people paid money, not so much in the fact that they were paying it to watch him lose. And Ali had that. He had that thing of, there were people paying to watch him win, and there was people paying because they wanted to see him lose. I don't think Tyson had it the same way. Tyson was like Rousey. I think people are watching to see how fast she destroys someone, and just like they were watching how fast he was going to destroy someone. And then they would complain about it, saying, I can't believe I paid that money for only 91 seconds. Or, you look at Ronda, my God, her last fight, this one's 34. The one before that was 14, 13, whatever it was. And, I've done 4 of her fights. The first one, I think, lasted 25 seconds. Liz Carmouche actually went like almost 4 minutes, so 3 minutes and something. So that one was, I had to really work hard in that one. And then you had Kat was 14 seconds. This one's 34 seconds. She has had, 12 professional fights that have basically spanned the distance of one championship fight. She's been in the cage for 25 minutes. 25 minutes now, 36 seconds. And that's incredible because she's fighting the best people they can put in front of her right now, and she's just handling them in such a way that's just crazy. I was in Vegas on Monday to do a fight, and one of the ringside physicians was saying, he goes, I just don't know how long she can do this. I go, do what? He goes, well, actually fight. She's going to want to give this up. You can only do this for so long. And I'm like, dude, doing it the way she's doing it, she can do it forever. Okay? Because, the real thing is, when you're fighting, and especially when you're fighting top opponents, you may come out with the win, but you're going to be damaged usually in some way. You're taking punishment. You're getting hurt, and you're working through that to, come to an end and finish your opponent. And those battles start to take little parts of you, and they start to diminish you. And that's when you say, I don't know how much longer I can do this. Well, she hasn't taken any punishment. She's not being hurt by her opponents. The way she's going right now, dude, Ronda Rousey can do this for the next 20 years. If she's not taking damage and punishment, she'll be there because if she wants, because she's not being diminished. The only thing that she's, possibly she's getting some boo-boos or owies in the gym from training, but it's definitely not from the fight.
We just talked about Mike Tyson in that comparison. You also hear the comparison about Rousey is like Royce Gracie in the early days, the start of the Art Davie era of the UFC. Here's the fundamental difference, though. Royce Gracie, especially through UFC's 1 and 2, he was wrecking people with his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. Ronda Rousey, okay, world-class judo player, Olympic bronze medalist, but she's winning with her striking as well. These are not one-dimensional victories. Now, you could say she knows a lot more than everybody else, like Royce Gracie in UFC's 1 and 2 knew a lot more than everybody else, but it's completely different in that just the broad array of skills.
Oh,
and by the way, Royce is your former training partner, so you would know his game intimately.
Well, yeah, but it's a different world, and the girls that Ronda are fighting, they're well-rounded mixed martial artists. You can look at Kat Zingano. She's a well-rounded mixed martial artist. You can look at Miesha Tate. My God, she's outstanding. Her ground game is outstanding. Her stand-up game has gotten so much better. She's doing a beautiful job. Look at her fight against Jessica Ai. It's not just, the fact that she's good. She's able to adjust. And that's really when you're watching a fighter come into a fight. You watch that fight with Miesha Tate and Jessica Ai, and you watch what was occurring. Jessica was getting to Miesha. She was landing the better shots in the beginning, And you watched Misha adjust. She sat back, saw what was occurring, and then decided, this is where I can go with this. And she decided, you know what? Jessica got a little bit of a lazy jab. You know what? I'm seeing her drop her. When that jab comes out, it's doing a circle instead of coming straight back. I'm going to start reaching over the top of it with her right hand. And she starts throwing overhand rights that are starting to crack Jessica. And that was the difference maker in that fight, because she saw that and she adjusted. And all of a sudden the fight starts going in her way. And that's what tells you she's a great fighter. She can adjust in the middle of the fight. And all these girls, they have complete games. You know, when Hoist was fighting, not everyone had a complete game. And he didn't have
no one really did. Yeah, and he did, absolutely.
But, you know, he was so good at an aspect that other people weren't, that he was able to go in there and dominate people. But, you know, the world has changed, except when it comes to Ronda Rousey. She's in that position. She's dominating good people because she's just been doing it for so long. She hasn't been doing the MMA for so long, but the judo that they have to worry about, her ground and the way she goes about her takedowns, is different than what most girls are used to just from training and competing with other people. And now her hands, Edmund, her trainer, has done such a good job with her hand speed. You look at her balance, you look at the way she's throwing her combinations, you look at her shoulder turn, and you look at the way she keeps her body balanced. She doesn't drop herself or angle herself off, which is going to put her a little bit off balance. She's doing a great job of keeping that level and dropping her entire body frame with her legs and coming up. The punch that hurt Beth was a left hook. I can tell you, when I was in there, you know, she ends up going down on the ground because there's a little bit of a trip that, you know, Ronda actually does. And when she pops up, there's an exchange, and then there's a left hook that hits Bethe, and that's the one that started her down the path where she couldn't recover. It blasted her, and it was beautifully thrown. It was short. It was exactly what we talk about. It wasn't this big looping shot. It was a beautifully thrown left hook, and that's by someone who was trained correctly.
Art, Davey and I spoke, well, we speak every day, quite frankly, but we spoke the day after the fight on Sunday. And Art was reminding me of something that we put on in our book about Art creating the UFC with Rorion Gracie. Is this legal? After UFC 2, and even going into the first UFC, now Art knew that his business partner, Rorion, definitely wanted his brother to win. He wanted to showcase Gracie Jiu-Jitsu to the world. Art didn't care who won. Yeah, right, exactly. John, you were, of course, there in the mix for everything. But you know, Art said to me when we were speaking on Sunday, after UFC 2, he realized if Royce Gracie won every UFC going forward, it was going to be bad for business. You want to build up a champion so much, but then you need some sort of rivalry or some sort of adversity. And that got me thinking, and we'll lead into our poll question in a minute, but when is the tipping point? How many Ronda Rousey squash victories does it take before the tide turns and people say this is boring or she's overly hyped or this is non-competitive? You know, I'm a Midwesterner, and growing up as a kid, it was the Tom Osborne era of Big 8 football with Nebraska. And every week, man, until you got to bowl season or when they played Oklahoma, Nebraska was winning 72-0 every week. The hardcore Nebraska Cornhusker fans loved it, but everybody else kind of turned off. And I don't think we're there yet with Ronda Rousey. I'm telling you, 3 or 4 more wins like this, and I think we might be there.
I don't think you're going to be there. I really don't.
Really?
I think, yeah, no, you know what? And it's because of the fact, I think you might get there with hardcore fans. That's a possibility. Where hardcore fans are going to say, well, I'm not going to pay the money to watch because I know she's going to crush that girl. I don't want to watch her because, you know, I've seen her fight this girl. I don't think it's going to be a competitive fight. You can get there with hardcore fans. But I think, again, she has transcended that hardcore into the mainstream where she has people that are watching her fight that never would turn into an MMA fight. They would never pay money for an MMA, you know, promotion to watch this show if it wasn't for her. And they watch because they love her. They want to see her win, and they're going to continue to support her because she's their hero. And when you're someone's hero, people will tune in.
Well, with that in mind, let's do this week's poll question. We have one every week. You can go online to cast your vote. Let's get it on podcast.com. So do you feel that a loss by Ronda Rousey in the next 12 months would be a good thing in the long term for the UFC? Vote yes or no at letsgetitonpodcast.com. And I understand people saying, well, why would it be a good thing when their most marketable star, their most famous fighter right now loses? But think about Mike Tyson losing to Buster Douglas. It changed the narrative of Mike Tyson. And maybe we're just talking about the hardcores, but suddenly you knew it just wasn't going to be a squash. Maybe there was some competition. Again, I'm not saying we're to that point, but I think it's something that fight fans at least need to consider. People eventually, I believe this, John, are going to tire of squashes.
Well, I think they're going to tire. Anyone gets tired of a squash when they can just say that the person that, is fighting doesn't belong in there because they're no good. But any fighter, especially in MMA, there's a lot of ways to lose. And Ronda can lose. To sit there and say, oh, you know what? It's like Floyd Mayweather. You look at Floyd, he can lose. But especially in boxing, it's going to be harder for him to lose in boxing than it would be for Ronda to lose in MMA, because there's only so many ways for somebody to attack Floyd. And Floyd is so good defensively that he's going to be a hard person to get out of that fight, where Ronda can be attacked in a multitude of ways. And she can make that simple mistake that can make a person catch her at the right time. She can get caught in a submission. She can be submitted, and she can definitely be hit with a shot that hurts her to the point where she's not going to be able to recover in the fight, and she loses. So it's just a different element that's there as far as MMA. It was like Fedor was, basically, I say undefeated at a point where he finally got into the match with Fabricio Verdum. He had, in my opinion, he was like 32, 33-0 at the time. That was incredible because there's so many ways for you to lose. Heenan Bahal had lost his first fight ever and then went on like a 33-0 streak until he runs into TJ Dillashaw, who everyone said, oh my God, Bahal's going to kill Dillashaw. He was a huge underdog. And what happened? TJ Dillashaw has showed, no, I know how to beat that dragon. And there's always going to be someone out there that is going to be the foil. Ronda in MMA has more ways to lose than boxers do. And all it's going to take is the one. So you can always have people say, oh, the person's not going to beat her. When Mike Tyson lost to Buster Douglas, there was reasons behind Mike Tyson losing to Buster. It was he stopped doing the things that made him successful. He stopped going to the trainers that got him to where he was at. Everything in his life changed, and he didn't train. And he finally ran into a guy that wasn't afraid. Didn't sit there and say, I'm just going to, collect my payday and get out of here because I'm happy. I actually want to try to win this fight. And Mike started to have problems when, not in that fight, it was before that, when all of his people that got him to that point, all of the trainers that put in all the time in teaching him things, all those people were gone. And the only thing he had was a bunch of people that were nothing more than fanboys training him and doing things that didn't make him better. That's when he started to have problems and became mortal. And if Ronda goes down the same road, the same thing will happen to her. But Ronda, at this point, is continuing to get better. And that's where you look at someone that is incredibly dangerous and you look and say, man, you know what? I'm saying that, yes, she can be beat. But right now, I don't see a whole lot of people out there that I think are going to do it.
And to your point on Tyson losing to Buster Douglas, Tyson and his camp had become so arrogant. Not only did they not hire and travel a cut man to Tokyo, it's an infamous story in boxing circles. John, you know this. When Tyson had his eye closed in the fight, they didn't even have end swell in the corner. They didn't
even have ice.
Nothing.
They were so clueless. They didn't have ice. Come on.
And I don't see Rousey falling into those traps. She's just a different type of person. Everybody can start to believe their own hype. I just don't see her going down that path. I don't think her mom would let her.
I think if there's a person that she's actually afraid of in this world, it's her mom.
Who was a world-class judo player.
She's awesome, but Ronda is the way she is because of that. Because of the way her mom, interacts with her and the way she was raised. And you look at some of the things she says, and they came from her mom. When she sits there and says, I don't train to be, to win on my best day. I train to win on my worst. That comes from her mom, and that's a mindset, and that's a beautiful mindset. If you're a high level competitor, you look at that and you go, absolutely, because you're never going to always compete at your best. There's going to be days where, you're just not your best. You don't feel good. You don't feel right. Things are bad. Just your biorhythms are down, whatever it is. It's just not your day. And the great ones still find a way to win. And that's what makes them great.
John, so one final point on this. Rousey's win over Correia was straightforward. There was one bit of mystery surrounding this fight. You know where I'm going with it now. We talked when you got back from Brazil, so you solved the mystery. But what was that conversation between Big John McCarthy and Ronda Rousey? How mysterious. What a controversy.
It was my chance to ask for a date, and I just tried. No.
I'm not telling your wife, Elaine.
My wife will kill me now. You know what? I'm not so stupid to think that Ronda would go out on a date with me. I'm a little too old and a little too ugly. But no, what that was if you go back and you watch the fight, there's this, at that point where Ronda hurts Bethe when she knocks her down, with the trip, and Bethe comes up. Bethe gets hit with a good shot, and then she gets hit with the left hook, and she's reaching out because she's hurt, and she actually pokes Ronda in the eye. I saw it. Her hand comes out, and I see Ronda kind of react to it. You can see her shake her head, and she just kept after her. And I didn't stop it because of the fact that she did hurt her, and she didn't react in a way that showed that, oh my God, I need to have time. And so I just let it go. And the fight was over, between 5 and 8 seconds later. But, after, I'm down with Bethe, and I'm, get her and help her to a stool. And she almost falls off of the stool. That's how hurt she still was. And I end up going over, and I get the time for the, match, and they tell me 34. I take that to my commission table and tell them what my call is with the time. And then Ronda's standing there, and, she's got her hand, she's kind of like, wiping her eye. And I look at her and I said, hey, how's your eye? And she goes, I got poked. And I said, well, I know that. I said, but you had hurt her and you were going after her. That's why I didn't stop it. And she goes, I know. That's why I love you as my ref. And so that's why I laughed. And that was all that was. It was because she got poked in the eye. And I was just seeing, hey, is your eye okay? Do you want a doctor to come in and look at it? And she said, no. And that was all there was.
John, aren't conspiracy theories fun? Turns out that's all it was. See, I secretly hoped you were telling Judo Jean LaBelle stories amongst yourselves.
There you go. I got a lot of those, man. So she's someone that might have more because she's been around Jean so much. But you know what? Yeah, the whole thing, with people and wanting. I understand why people want I watched it. I didn't have an idea, when it happened. It's like it's no big deal to me. I'm not even thinking about a camera, even seeing it. And then I watched it. My wife says, "No, it was really almost endearing." I look, because you were laughing and she was laughing, and I said, oh, this is what it was. It was no big deal. It was all about her eye. So just making sure she was okay, because she did get poked, but she just tossed it to the side like it was nothing and finished the fight. And, the one thing that cracks me up is that there's people out there saying, oh, it was a little bit of an early stoppage. And
what? Who said that?
Dude, I love people, man. Oh, you know what? If you're on Twitter, you're going to get all kinds. And, people say stuff and you just look, and I just laugh. And I go, someday I hope someone, I hope that you're in competition, and when you end up face down, ass up, and you're out, I hope someone has the common sense to stop someone from beating on you when you can't defend yourself. So that's just, people are crazy. They want this to be, a fight to the death. They don't understand this is not what our sport is. Our sport's about competition. And when you get to a point where someone has overwhelmed you and hurt you to the point you can't defend yourself, that's the end of the fight, and we can always come back another day.
John, if you take hell on social media, man, there's no hope for the rest of us. That's all I'm saying.
And you know what? The best part is, when you're young and stupid, you start to take, people criticize you and stuff, it gets you mad. And it's like, then you get old and kind of just like I am, where I don't care anymore. And it's like, I just laugh at them. It's just like, really? You think I'm going to answer you with this? You're an idiot. Bye.
Well, we won't answer you on Twitter. Well, sometimes John will, but we'll definitely answer your questions. Fire away whatever you would like to ask. This is where it becomes candid. You can challenge us. Ask us whatever you'd like. Info at letsgetitonpodcast.com. Go ahead. Say to John, why did you stop that fight when you did? John will definitely give you an answer, right, my friend?
Yeah, an answer of silence.
Of course, please include a pronunciation guide for your name when you send your question. Tim Crisco did indeed send a pronunciation guide with his question. Thank you very much, Tim. He writes, John, I remember the old single-digit UFC events where you refereed every bout on the card. In the modern era, there are several refs. For example, UFC 189 had 4 referees. Why exactly is that? How does it benefit the different parties involved, and how does it affect you specifically? Really good question.
That is a good question. And it's how it affects me specifically doesn't affect me at all. This sport is evolving, and it's evolved from the beginning. What's funny is I get people all the time that try to compare what occurred in the past, what occurred at UFC 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, 12, 20, whatever it is, with today. And you can't compare them. It was a different world. It's not only that the rules were different, but trust me, I stopped fights completely differently back then than I do now because it was a different world. At that time, if you go back to UFC's, 12, 13, 14, 15, any of those, I stopped fights a lot earlier than I stop them now. Even those were considered, that was the barbaric day. No, we would, stop a fight quickly for a cut or a broken nose or things like that. We got guys out of the fight because the person who owned it was getting, just ambushed by all these people trying to shut the sport down. So we were taking so much, care in trying to protect people and, hey, don't let this guy get hurt. Don't let this happen. Don't let this occur, that we were stopping things way earlier than what you'll see now. And there's people, they'll go back and they'll sit there and say, why did you stop that fight now? But you let Robbie Lawler and Rory McDonald go forever. It's like, it's a different world. It's a different sport. We do things differently. When it comes to the referees, at one time I was the only referee there was in the UFC. And, look I almost died at UFC 3 from an allergy. I ate swordfish and it freaking almost closed me off. And so they didn't have a referee almost. And so that was their thing. Oh, we need to get somebody else. And I didn't blame them. They did. And so they started trying to bring other people in, and it became a process. But when the athletic commissions, when you really started seeing a lot of referees, it was really when, Nevada in 2001, September of 2001 was the very first show in Nevada, and they brought in, Mark Ratner had 4 officials, I think, at the time. He brought in, a couple and had a couple from there in Nevada that he wanted to try to get some experience and stuff. And that was the start of you seeing a lot of officials. And, it's good. It's good for the officials as far as it doesn't put so much pressure that they're doing every fight. Because look when you're doing the fight, there's a lot that's going on. There's a lot of concentration going on. You are physically doing a lot of stuff. It's nice to have the break, and you need the break at times because we have to go in the back and talk to the other fighters and make sure that we go over, bout conduct and rules and things for them. And so it gives us a spacing to do that. It allows us to go in the back and take a piss. When you got the next fight, you can't do that either. And trust me, the announcer gets to do that. The referee.
Oh yes.
Does. Yeah.
You know how much Diet Mountain Dew I drink
Exactly,
during television broadcast?
But the whole thing with, does it affect me? It doesn't affect me at all. I love the people that I work with. This is another misconception that people have is, if you think, and if it does occur where you see it, that referees are in competition with each other, then there's something wrong going on here. A referee should never be in competition with another referee. A referee is in competition with themselves, with doing the very best job they can do under the given circumstances that they're giving. If you're not doing everything you can to help your fellow officials, then you're doing something to hurt the sport. So what you're saying is that your ego is so grand that it's more important than the sport as a whole. Now, you know what? Your job is to help your officials so they can perform at the very best level they can perform at, and so it does the best that it can do for the sport of MMA.
Next up is Jay Hackett. Jay writes, I noticed some refs ask the fighters before touching gloves, fighter, do you have any questions? What's the point of that? I've never heard a fighter ask anything at that point. Some refs do this and other refs don't. Again, another excellent question.
Yeah, you know what? And it's when we talk about fight instructions, even in the legislation of athletic commissions, there's going to be something about a referee must go through instructions. Those instructions can be given in the ring or in the back, and it's going to say these different places. Well, for the most part, boxing has always had it to where they do face-offs with every fight for the most part, where MMA didn't do face-offs in the beginning at all, and then got into doing the main event, sometimes co-main event. They'll do a face-off, and that's all for the promoter. That's really what it's for, because if you've already done that rules meeting with the fighter, you don't have to bring them together in the ring. But that would be the purpose. If you had not gone over rules, by law, you've got to do that rules meeting, even though if that's when you're doing your rules meeting, you're really screwed up. But it's a matter of, everyone's going to have their own thing. And you're going to get guys that, do things that, kind of this is my saying. And, Kenny Bayless in boxing says, what I say, you must obey. And, hey, whatever. Joe Cortez used to say, I'm firm, but I'm fair, and hey, great. You got a little tagline, whatever it's going to be. I look at it at that point, I try to go through, hey, protect yourself at all times, obey my commands. Okay. And really, at that point, I'm not there to, it's not about me. It's about the fighters. And so I'll tell them, I don't tell them, touch gloves now. I'll tell them, if you want to touch gloves, touch them now. And Rousey and Correia, I just look good. You don't want to, step back. Good luck to both. Yeah, and that's it. And you get it going, because it's not about what you say there. It's about the fighters.
John, my mentor, when I was a boxing referee, the great Mills Lane, I was 1/10,000th as good as Mills Lane, but I certainly tried my hardest when I was refereeing a lot of boxing. He said there is nothing in boxing that says that the fighters have to touch gloves. So don't try to make them as the referee, because you're taking away. It's the same philosophy that you have as a referee. You're not the show as the referee. Don't pretend like you are.
Well, and that's where you get a lot. Mills Lane used to actually say, do I have any questions from the challenger? Any questions from the champion? Let's get it on. Okay, great. And, and that's his tagline. Any questions from the challenger? Any questions from the champion? Let's get it on. Great. But again, no one ever went to a fight to watch Mills Lane. Got to tell you, it just didn't happen. He's short, he's ugly, and he's got a nasty voice. Okay? No one goes to a fight to watch John McCarthy. He's big, he's ugly, and he's got a softer voice. It's just, look, this is not about you. This is about the athletes. And so if you're sitting there starting to get on a pulpit and say a bunch of stuff, you're making it about you, and that's where you're starting to make the mistake.
Remember, email us your questions, info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. Well, still to come on this week's episode of Let's Get It On, John and I will take an in-depth look at the win by Husamar Palhares versus Jake Shields in World Series of Fighting last Saturday, and we'll discuss what a referee should do when accidental nudity occurs in a fight, such as was the unfortunate situation of Elizabeth Phillips in her UFC bout versus Jessamyn Duke. With Big John McCarthy, I'm Sean Wheelock, and you are listening to Let's Get It On. It's the book that Wrestling Observer calls a must-read for any MMA fan. Jonathan Snowden of Bleacher Report describes as riveting and amazing, and TheFightNerd.com says nothing is held back. Pick this book up right away. Is This Legal? The inside story of the first UFC from the man who created it, written by UFC founder Art Davie and me, Sean Wheelock, with the foreword by John McCarthy, is now available to listeners of this podcast at the special price of $12.48. That's far less than you'll pay for the book on Amazon and half price of what you'll pay in store at Barnes & Noble. Buy it directly from the publisher now online at ascendbooks.com and enter the promo code LEGAL50. That's ASCEND books.com, promo code LEGAL50. Learn the true story of how the UFC came into existence in the book that Randy Couture describes as honest, shocking, and enthralling, and that has a rating of 4.9 out of 5 stars from Amazon Reader Reviews. Is This Legal? The inside story of the first UFC from the man who created it, by UFC founder Art Davie and me, Sean Wheelock, with the foreword by Big John McCarthy. Available now online at ascendbooks.com for just $12.48 when you use the promo code LEGAL50. Hey, this is Sean Wheelock.
And this is Big John McCarthy.
If you're a fan of our show, then you're going to love the rest of the Ignotainment podcast lineup.
Like the Ocho Man behind the 8 Ball and the Whiskey Philosopher with Jeff Cooper.
You can find these great podcasts and more at ignotainment.com. Thanks again and enjoy the rest of the program.
Let's get it on!
When looking for new and exciting clothing concepts, look no further than Lambs to Lions. Lambs to Lions has great designs that incorporates the past from boxing with the new and exciting evolution of MMA. We all start out as lambs, but with time, training, and hard work, we can all become lions. Be part of the Lambs to Lions movement and check out all of their great designs. You can get your Lambs to Lions gear at the Las Vegas Fight Shop or go to lambstolionsbrand.com.
Now, back to Let's Get It On with your hosts, Big John McCarthy and Sean Wheelock.
While the vast majority of the MMA world was focused last Saturday on UFC 190 in Brazil, World Series of Fighting held a solid card in Las Vegas, which culminated in a high-quality main event, Rousimar Palhares versus Jake Shields. Palhares, of course, defeated Shields by third-round submission to initially retain his World Series of Fighting welterweight title, but the fight was plagued by controversy, and in victory, Palhares has been both stripped of his championship and suspended indefinitely by World Series of Fighting, John.
Yeah, it's unfortunate when you look at what happened. That I was considering that we were even talking about it in Brazil, saying, "Hey, man, that's a quality fight. You got two guys that are, in the top 10 in the welterweight division that are going on against each other that night." So we expected it to be a good fight. We were actually talking about what we thought was going to happen. Was Palhares going to get a leg lock on Jake, and it was unfortunate to hear later on what had occurred and all of the controversy that was going with it.
Well, there's really two instances of controversy. One is that Shields was claiming, as he was holding top position, including mount, that he was continually being eye gouged by Palhares. And then the second, and I think the more noteworthy controversy, is the end of the fight. And for those of you who haven't seen it, Palhares, it is a gorgeous textbook Kimura sweep. Shields taps. Palhares responds to the tap by cranking in deeper. It's one thing not to release until the referee comes in, but Palhares cranks in deeper on the Shields tap. Steve Mazzagatti is the referee. John, I know your technique is you come in, you immediately start to unlock the submission hold. Mazzagatti started slapping on Palhares, and Palhares just simply did not let go, which he unfortunately has a history of as a pro MMA fighter.
Yeah, unfortunately he does, and he's. Man, you tell guys, I don't give a damn what it's about. It's like talking to your kids, and you say, "Hey, you know what? Let me make this as clear as I can for you. You've got to be smart. You gotta go about, doing things the right way. You can't sit there and do something and say, oh, it doesn't matter that I do it different or something like that. It does matter. It matters a lot." Okay. And, God damn it, he has tarnished his name. He has tarnished everything that he's worked so hard for, because he keeps on going past that point of what is sportsmanlike. And, there comes a point where you just got to say, all right, I have no idea, but you've got a mental problem here as far as not stopping when someone taps, because a tap in fighting, be it MMA, be it if you're grappling, it's a point of saying, okay, you've won, you got me, you at this point could have broken me, and I'm tapping to get out of this, and hey, congratulations. And he's not taking that, because that's the point that, as the fighter, you're releasing that hold, because, man, hey, I did what I came here to do. I'm excited. I'm happy. And he wants to put it on somebody, just that little extra bit, to the point of you look and you go, what is wrong with you? Wake up. Get a clue. This is not about hurting people. This is about competition. And if your thing is to hurt someone, then go away, because you're no good for the sport. You're no good for anything. And that's really what's going to end up happening to him. He has done things. If you look at that match and you go to that point where Jake gives up position, Jake takes him down, he reaches for the Kimura, and you know that it's tight as soon as you see Jake give up position. When he flops over, it's telling you, he's got a problem. As the referee, it's telling you, we got a tight one here. I got to get ready to try to relieve pressure if this ends up being a tap. Now, a Kimura is always tough for an official because the hold's going to be on one side and the free hand to tap is usually in a position where it's almost in an awkward position on the opponent, because usually it's a cross body that, just as Palhares had. So I've got to look at the hold to see damage, and I've got to look to the other side to watch the hand. And with that, I also have to understand how I need to break the hold, or at least relieve pressure on the hold, work against the hold, so I don't allow my fighter, if he does or if she does tap out, I am there to protect them, and I don't allow them to get damaged past that point. And the one thing that you brought up when you were talking, Sean, is Jake tapped fast. He knew he was caught, and he wasn't in that much pain when he tapped. Obviously, it was tight, but he started tapping a little bit early on it because he's like, he got me. I can't get out, and this is going to be bad. And he starts tapping. And from the moment he starts tapping, that hand travels back in that position of getting tighter and tighter, a good 12 to 14 inches, which is a world of difference. And this is where you have someone that's honestly attempting to purposefully damage their opponent when the fight is over. And that's what you look at and you go, man, what is wrong with you?
And I understand fighters and a lot of trainers will have this philosophy. They instill this in their fighters. Look, it is your responsibility to release the submission hold, not when your opponent taps in a fight. I'm not talking training now, but in a fight, not when your opponent taps, but when the referee comes in. That's one thing. But to feel the tap of Shields and then Palhares to then crank deeper and deeper, that's dirty. And then Mazzagatti comes in, and because Mazzagatti employs a different technique than you, John, and let's just be honest, we're not bagging on Steve Mazzagatti. He has a very accomplished career as an MMA referee who's doing the main event in Nevada. But where you would come in, and a lot of referees would come in, Rob Hines, for example, Jason Herzog, Kevin McDonald, looked to break the hold. Mazzagatti came in by essentially tapping on Palhares, and Palhares was just not going to let go, and he didn't let go until, quite frankly, he wanted to.
Well, and that's where our problem occurs, is the fact that if you're going to tap on the fighter, you are absolutely 100% putting your faith in the fact that the fighter is going to follow that tap of you touching them and saying stop. You're 100% hoping that the fighter is going to follow that command. But when they don't, now's when the problem starts to intensify. Now's when our problem starts to become, oh my God, he's not stopping. And to sit there and continue to tap on the fighter, you know what? You're not doing justice to the person that you are supposed to be protecting. At that point, your job is to protect Jake Shields. And you've got to know how to protect Jake Shields. And tapping on the back of his opponent is not stopping what's occurring here. And you need to understand how you're supposed to stop that.
And let's be honest, too, the only reason that Rousimar Palhares was even in World Series of Fighting, when he's clearly one of the best welterweights in the world, is because of what he did versus Mike Pearson in the UFC October 2013. He caught Pearson a heel hook. He didn't let go. Keith Peterson, who's a great referee, was the referee. He dove in. He really sold out his body, and I was teasing him on it. He sold out his body because he knew that Pierce was in serious danger of having his knee shredded.
Yeah, and it
Same
wasn't
situation.
That was the last straw. That was the last straw with Palhares in the UFC. He had several earlier occurrences where people had complained. The New Jersey State Athletic Commission had fined him and suspended him, I think, 90 days for holding I think it was a knee bar against Drawl. and you look and again, you got to go back. The referee needs to understand who he's dealing with in that fight. And you need to understand exactly what that guy does, how he does it, and where you need to be in position to stop what's occurring. That's what we're looking for. And you can't give space. You can't give time to that person, because it's going to happen fast. And you've got to be in a place. So when you're working with a Palhares, you don't have a lot of time to sit there and tap on them or not be in position. You've got to be exactly where you're at, and you've got to know exactly what you need to do to break that hold, or else someone can get hurt. And that's what has occurred. And that's why, look at Bellator had a chance to sign Palhares. They said, you know what, we're passing. We've seen with this person that, they don't respect the sport. They don't want to listen. They want to do things their own way, and we don't want to have any part of them. And the World Series of Fighting looked and said, that's a good fighter. You know what? Yep, we're going to give him a chance, but we're going to have a zero tolerance on him. I think that's the wording they used when they signed him. And right away, he had a couple of instances, but it was close. And then this one right here, look I don't care what anyone says. That is someone trying. When he knows the fight's over and he continues to crank it. If you want to sit there and you have that submission hold and you feel the tap and you're waiting for the official to come in and tell you stop, and you want to hold it in position, okay, I understand it. When you are continuing to try to crank it and that humerus on Jake's arm is getting twisted to a point it can snap, no, that's you trying to purposely hurt somebody.
So, John, that's the ending sequence of the fight. Again, one of the two real controversies that are getting the vast majority of attention. But let's talk about the other controversy. And Shields has been strong on this, saying that this really led to him even being caught in that Kimura sweep and finished by Palhares in round 3, that he was continually gouged in the eyes. And from a referee's perspective, if we look at the unified rules of the ABC, can't poke the eye. You can't rake the eyes. You can't gouge the eyes. But you can face wash. You can essentially put your glove in the face, in the eyes of the opponent, and kind of rub across. So it's sort of a fine line, but as a referee, you understand it's also not a fine line because you can see intent.
Well, as simple as it gets, I had a fight in Brazil. Warley Alves fought Nordine, and you watch that fight. There was an incident where Warley started to use his chin to put pressure in the eye socket of Nordine. And I told him, said, hey, watch your chin. And then I went over to him and told him, don't do that. You do it, I'm going to take points. I'm going to take you out of the fight. Now, I did that off to the side because, hey, not everyone needs to know what's going on. But that's the type of thing that, if you take someone's vision away from them in the fight, you're taking one of their greatest tools. We don't allow blind people to fight. There's a reason why, okay? And when you have someone that is putting their hands in the area that, the way that Husamar is, that's a different technique than we have most guys doing. We'll get guys pushing off of the face, absolutely. And they can do that as long as their fingers are extended out and not starting to curl in towards the face, towards, actually pushing, their fingers in the eyes. But you can see his thumb is going in towards that eye socket. I don't care whatever. By putting his hands there, what's he making Jake do? He's making Jake turn his face and close his eyes. He's putting Jake in a position, he's a blind fighter, even when he's not getting eye gouged. And so many times you're going to see guys taking, and they're going to use their forearm, and they're going to bring that hand across the face and use it to take and turn the chin and to leverage the face away to get some space and to cause a problem for the person. That's a normal technique in MMA. When you see someone taking their hands and fingers and pushing them into the face and into the eye area of their opponent, that's you starting to go past that edge that we allow you to go. And Steve, in that, he warned him. He warned him multiple times, but there even got to a point in the, at the end of the second round, you can hear Jake Shields yell out, he's gouging my eyes, right? And nothing happens. And look at no one can hold their cool when they think that people are cheating against them, when they're fighting dirty. And, part of, I always tell everyone, you've heard me say it how many times, Sean, we don't fight angry. You fight angry, you lose.
Right.
And this is what's occurring. it is going to alter the way Jake is fighting because he's getting angry. He feels like things are happening to him that are illegal and no one is doing anything to stop it. It's no different than if you go back in boxing, go back to Victor Ortiz against, Floyd Mayweather.
Right.
Floyd Mayweather was hitting Victor with elbows. You can see him. If you go back and watch the fight, you'll watch him and he's getting mad. And finally, he's actually doing well in the round, and he gets hit with an elbow, and he kind of looks over at Joe Cortez, and it was like, okay, you're not going to do anything about it. And he comes forward, and he headbutts Floyd, and he does it out of frustration. He got mad. And that's when the whole sequence comes about where, it was ugly, and then there was the knockout. It was just an ugly sequence that happened because we had a fighter who felt like, I am being fouled and you as the official are doing nothing about it. And now I'm going to try to take it into my own hands. I'm getting angry. And when I get angry, bad things are going to happen for me usually. That's just the way it is. And that's what happened with Victor. And that's kind of what happened with Jake. Jake was in a position where he's feeling like, I don't know where to go with this. I take him down. Yeah, but then he's going to start putting his fingers here. I don't want to. I know where I want this fight to go, but every time I put it there, bad things are happening to me that I don't feel are actually part of clean competition.
So we talked about Paul Yaris and Shields from a referee's perspective. Let's move on to another fight. And again, let's approach this now from a referee's perspective. UFC on Fox 16 2 weeks ago, Elizabeth Phillips versus Jessamine Duke. And as I think most of you know by now, Phillips, at the very end of round number 3, third and final round, briefly had her right breast exposed. Now, virtually all of the discussion on the situation is either focused on criticizing Reebok for faulty fight gear or just, quite frankly, to be salacious at the expense of Elizabeth Phillips. And all of you know we are a completely different kind of show. Big John and I always take a different approach from everything else that is out there in the MMA and combat sports universe. So, John, let's look at this fight, this situation with Elizabeth Phillips, and let's look at, I don't like wardrobe malfunction. I think that's such a dated term from Janet Jackson when, first of all, it wasn't a malfunction. It was rehearsed. I worked that Super Bowl for the BBC. That was done in rehearsal. Janet Jackson, Justin Timberlake. This wasn't a wardrobe malfunction. This is accidental nudity. It's not the first time it's happened. It's not the last time it's going to happen. Let's just talk about this situation from a referee's perspective. Herb Dean was the referee. It happened so quickly. Dean didn't get involved, again, mainly because it happened in the closing seconds of the fight.
Yeah, look at when it comes to women's MMA, obviously there's going to be some things that can occur that are different than a man's. But, we have the same thing. Back at UFC 2, my first show ever.
Yeah.
I did the first couple of fights, and I was like, oh, this is going to be easy. This is great. And the one that changed my perspective on life was I think it was the third fight. It was Johnny Rhodes against a guy named David Levicki. And the full moon came out. Okay, that's a man's nudity. And you look, and I'm trying to pull up Johnny Rhodes's gi pants, and every time I pull him up, David Levicki crosses his legs and tries to push him away, and out comes the full moon again. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do here? So, this has been happening since the beginning.
Well, you had Joe Saw and Keith Hackney with a similar situation.
Oh no, that was just more of a groin shot at the time that it was legal.
No, but if you think of the ending sequence, though, Hackney grabs the trunks of Joe Son. It's not a full moon, but I think it's a half moon that comes out.
Yeah, but this is what's occurring. With women's MMA, it's a possibility. Absolutely, a top can get moved, and it's a possibility of the chest area showing. Oh my God, we have a boob that comes out. Okay. Someday, hopefully, as a society, we'll figure out that it's just a boob. It's not the biggest, it's not the biggest, thing that ever's going to happen in the world. We all have them. I hate to say just about everyone, unless some doctor cuts it off, we've all got nipples. So, it's part of life. As the referee, look at, if we have a malfunction, if we have a shirt that comes up and we have a non-fight ending sequence, we're going to stop it. We're going to stop the action. We're going to, take, and we're going to let them adjust that clothing, and then we're going to get the fight going again as quick as we can. That was at the end of the round, and so there was nothing for Herb to do. Herb couldn't have done a darn thing. But the real question is going to be, when you have that occur and we have a fight ending sequence that is occurring at the same time that it happens. Now the referee is in that bad spot, because do they stop the fight and the action to take care of this, oh my God, we've got a boob that's showing, or do they allow it to go on and see if that, sequence can play out to where we have the finish of the fight? No matter what they do, someone's going to say they were wrong. If they stop the fight to adjust that malfunction, someone's going to say they're wrong. If they allow it to go and let the malfunction stay and we have a boob showing, someone's going to say they're wrong, because you can't appease everyone in this situation. And it's going to happen. It's out there, that's part of, female fighting. The only thing that can really be done is, if they want to take away that, possibility, stop letting girls fight in basically, a half-top sports bra, put them in a full rash guard. If that's what you're so worried about, oh my God, we could have, a nipple pop, then you know what? Make it so it can't happen. Dress them like, Jessica Aguilar wore the shirt, the full
I was just going to say
rash
what
guard
Jessica
shirt
Aguilar wore
against Claudia Gadelha, and put them all in that and say, that's what you have to wear, but, in the big scheme of life, oh my God, it's not a big deal.
And, a lot of referees listen to our podcast, and we're very, very appreciative of that fact. And, John, they look to you for guidance. And this does happen. Big shows, small shows, major promotions, mom and pops on television, on the internet. This happens. There's male nudity. There's female nudity. It's just what happens sometimes in fighting. It's an awkward situation for referees because it's never really discussed, and it's not in the unified rules. I hate to put it in the same category, but it's almost like when you hear about a fighter having an accident with their bladder or with their bowels. Nobody ever really wants to talk about it. Then when it happens, as a referee, sometimes you're kind of frozen, like, what do I do here?
Well, if you're the referee and you're frozen, then you haven't done your job in preparing yourself for that situation.
But we know that happens.
It's going to happen, yes, and it's going to happen. If you do enough fights, it's going to happen to you, and you should have your answers in place before you ever step into that cage. So when it does occur, you know what your answer is. You know exactly which way you're going to go, and you take care of the problem accordingly.
I do feel, and this is a side note, but I feel bad for Elizabeth Phillips. I don't know her, and everybody has different levels of modesty, but because of the age we live in now with the internet, it's not difficult to find the images. 20 years ago, basically, maybe this lives on a grainy VHS, and some people are going to hit the pause button, but that's about it. So I don't know how she feels about it. Some people are hitting the pause button, but it doesn't live there on a Google image search. So it's a tough situation. I'm not in the blame the victim at all, and I think we're, as a society, moving a lot towards blaming the victim. But again, if you want to avoid the situation, maybe you go to what Jessica Aguilar favors when she fights. It's the slippery slope.
That's it. If you're worried about it, I know Misha Tate said that, she was, she had the fight, coming up, a couple of fights later, obviously, and she went and said, no, I'm putting on 2 sports bras. I'm not going to let that happen to me. Okay, great. If that's what you think that it's going to take for, that to, not occur to you, do what you think you have to do to make you feel comfortable in what you're going to fight in. And if it's, you say that is something that I am worried about. I'm worried about having, myself exposed in any fashion during a fight that would mortify me. Well, then wear the appropriate things so that it's not going to happen to you. If it doesn't bother, if you're like, dude, it's a boob, who cares? And if you look at it like I do, and it's like, so what? Dude, I get, people all the time. You'll see me dressing in the parking lots, man. I hate to say public nudity is something I try not to do, but I got to change at times, and I got to get out of stuff, and I'm so always stripping down in front of, people out in the parking lot, or, commission people and women and stuff. Say, excuse me, I hope you don't mind, but I got to get changed. It doesn't bother me. And so, if you haven't seen one, well, here, go ahead and look. I don't care. But, it really depends on the individual person. And I hope, I hope that doesn't affect Elizabeth. It's something that, who cares? She's fighting, she's doing her best. And so her top comes a little bit up. If you are the guy that's, I got to look that up on the internet and I got to get the freeze frame, dude, you really have problems.
That's outstanding. John, just as a final point on this, for referees who do listen to this program, is maybe the rule of thumb to treat these situations It's like a mouthpiece coming out. Wait for that natural break, but don't force it.
It is. This is the whole thing is you look at, you've got to understand that you've got to be fair in the fight. And it is a malfunction of a piece of clothing. And again, I don't know how many times any way I can say it. It's a freaking boob. Who cares? Okay. If that's the biggest thing in the world, don't stop a fight if there is a fight ending sequence, because that's what the people are there for. That's what those girls are fighting for. And if you affect the fight where you alter it because of it, now it's becoming something that is affecting the fight. If the boob is out for 2 seconds, 3 seconds, it was already out for the one. Don't affect the fight. But if you don't have a fight-ending sequence, then absolutely right away we're going to go stop here and help them fix it if you have to. Let them fix it. They've got fingers. That's the best part. But take care of the problem right away so you don't have them feeling uncomfortable in the fight either.
And, of course, our tagline on Let's Get It On is we separate fact from fiction. And hopefully we've done that, too, with Janet Jackson and Justin Timberlake. Because, again, I did that Super Bowl. I commentated it for the BBC. I saw the rehearsal. There was no wardrobe malfunction. It was rehearsed. And then CBS got mad, and then the FCC got mad. You knew that, John, didn't you?
Oh, come on, man. She had a cool nipple ring. It was like a sunburst.
She just randomly had that on. Justin Timberlake just randomly ripped off her top during the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and Justin's that guy, he would do that. He'd put his dick in a box.
It's the best ending line in the brief history of our podcast. Well, we are back with you next week for a new episode of Let's Get It On, first available on Friday. Download and subscribe to our podcast on the iTunes Store for Android. Download the Stitcher app and subscribe. And you can go straight to our website, letsgetitonpodcast.com. You can also find us on social media, facebook.com/letsgetitonpodcast, and on Twitter @PodcastMMA for this show, and for us personally, @John McCarthy MMA and @Sean Wheelock. To ask us a question, make a comment, or inquire about becoming a sponsor of Let's Get It On, email us at info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. That's info@letsgetitonpodcast.com. We know and truly appreciate that more and more of you are finding our program every single week. Please help us by continuing to spread the word. For Big John McCarthy, our producer Chris Lakin, and my 4-year-old Hadley, who has continually chimed in throughout the recording of this podcast, as well as our entire crew, I'm Sean Wheelock. Thanks for listening, everyone. This has been a presentation of Ignotainment Media Network, online at ignotainment.com.
Let's Get It On with Big John McCarthy and Sean Wheelock, only on the Ignotainment Media Network. Don't forget to leave a rating and review in the comments section of the iTunes Podcast Store. If you have questions, comments, or are interested in sponsoring the show, contact us at info@letsgetitonpodcast.com, or check out our additional lineup of podcasts, including Ocho Man, Behind the 8 Ball, The Whiskey Philosopher, and Youth Baseball Talk at ignotainment.com.